All right, here we go. We're live. So thanks to Lindy for joining me. We're just kicking off a little bit of essentially like a web chat. I was sort of actually looking to do this for quite some time, just in the sense of having some more kind of curiosity-driven conversations, kind of just informal conversations about kind of like a day in the life of a trainer or what it's like, being a passionate fitness person who gets to do what we love for a living. And there are some awesome trainers and grads and students and colleagues and peers that I have that I just wanted to take an opportunity to even get to know a little bit better and potentially share some interesting concepts and ideas with anybody who's interested. So couldn't think of anybody better to kick it off than Lindy Drope. She's one of the personal trainers, one of the best personal trainers working out of our Steve Nash Langley location, and is a BCPTI grad, which is super cool. We're super proud of everything she's accomplished. So I think it's going to be fun to kick off the conversation. And essentially, I assume the audience for this is kind of trainers, students, people that are interested in fitness. But like at the end of the day, if you like the sound of the conversation and you learn something from it, then everybody's welcome. So thanks to Lindy. Welcome for jumping on. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Awesome. So, I mean, it's a little bit funny that we're all in this sort of work from home, gyms are closed kind of scenario. But gives us an opportunity to do things that are a little bit different and, kind of looking for ways to stay connected. And, we're so used to being around people and helping, helping our clients and helping members and helping inspire our team members every day. I was kind of looking for something to do that would maybe sort of fill that gap a little bit. So here we go. I wanted to know a little bit about you and what got you started and sort of what you do and what life is like for like you operate at a really, really high level. So I wanted to kind of dive into that a little bit. So if we can, let's just kind of back up, and I'm curious about what inspired you to become a personal trainer in the first place.
Well, I started from similar to you as like a full-time athlete, just so dedicated into sports, fitness, training. Like my idea of a Friday night was I have more hours to spend at the gym and explore different exercises. And so I was living it, I was breathing it. My friends, my community, it was all in that health and fitness and training kind of environment. And I would rather been training than at school. So I kind of finished high school and started working at Steve Nash as a front desk. And I think I got fired within like the first 4 hours. My fitness manager gave me a BCPTI portfolio and was like, "You're like really, really good at this industry, just not at front desk. You need to go be a trainer."
Were you having a hard time staying behind the desk? Is that why?
Oh yeah, I was like doing handstands. I was like picking up the phone, then like putting them on hold and doing jumping jacks. Like I was just like a spitting image of what needed to be a trainer. So I started BCPTI and
So let me just ask a question there. Was personal training something you were thinking about already, or did it take an invitation from somebody who could see that potential in you for you to start thinking about it? Like, what was the thing that actually turned you on to the idea?
that's such a good question because I was coaching gymnastics. I was coaching like sports and athletics. Like I was a coach. I wasn't a trainer. It was like group kind of young kids in soccer type thing wanting to get fit. And then when I started at Steve Nash, I remember like looking at the trainers and they would like be programming for their clients and I'd see them like greet their clients. I was like, that is so cool. Like something is so interesting about these people walking into the gym, scanning in and like they're reporting to a trainer. Like it's like the coolest thing, but I still never wanted to be a trainer. Like I kind of feel ashamed of the fact that I thought this, but I was like, oh no, I want to be like a doctor. I want to like go to school. I want to go to, I don't know, I'll start with kinesiology, but I want to be a physio or like something super impressive. I had this notion in my mind that a trainer wasn't a high paid professional, mature career. I was like, oh, these are kind of like, I don't know, students. Like
Sure, yeah.
training because they used to play soccer and they like to do that, and didn't really think seriously of it until that fitness manager had got me to consider it. And as soon as I started school, I was like, this is what I need to do. This is like, I don't care what the cost is. I am 100%, I'm all in.
That's awesome. I think I really like that you said that, because I think there's definitely kind of, there's some myths, or there's a reputation about, training. Maybe it's like super broy, or it's like I pick things up and put them down, or it's like a part-time job, or you do it in your 20s. And like maybe when I became a trainer, like over 10, 15 years ago, that was maybe more so the truth. But the industry has evolved so much that people like myself that were in it back then were still in it. And we've also seen kind of this explosion of opportunity, and we're becoming more and more necessary based on how automated and sedentary everybody else is getting in their jobs. So yeah, I think it is really cool to recognize that, it's a very meaningful job. It's very impactful. It makes a big difference, but it is also something you can do where you get to make a living and you get to have a career at it. And it's been really cool for me to see that happening. Like, I kind of feel I got in at the time where that started to happen. Whereas, now there's already a different impression of what being a personal trainer is, because there's so many different ways to be one, right?
Totally. And like, I just think, I probably like 25% of my clients have at one point been like, oh yeah, like my brother's a trainer, I'm a trainer, I'm certified. But the definition of being a trainer now compared to what it used to be is just so different. And what it means to be and who you show up as when you are a trainer. What are you taking on as a role? Or are you just a bro that got certified and lifting weights up and down with their friend?
You got it. So you went to BCPTI, which is cool. I don't want to make this video a pitch for that program, although there could be other times where we talk about that. But what I want to know is, so you go through this 7-week program, you get the benefit of this hands-on, practical, sort of like experiential learning environment. When you first started as a trainer, can you share a little bit about like maybe what kinds of obstacles you had to face, or like, what was sort of like a challenge in first getting started?
Oh gosh, a lot. When I first started as a trainer, I was like 90 pounds, looked like probably just got out of grade 9. I looked very young. I was very small. I had a lot of energy, and I had a very vibrant personality, which I think initially when I came into the club, it kind of turned some people off. You win some, you lose some. I felt like I was too young, underexperienced, standing next to these trainers who had been there for many years, knew the sales, knew everything, had their clientele. So I'd say that was my biggest struggle, is I had like an insecurity of, oh my gosh, who's going to pay? Level 1 was like, I don't know, $80 a session. Who's going to actually be forking out thousands of dollars to train with this little 14-year-old? Like, that was my inner dialogue. But again, yeah, I faced so much rejection, but I just kept going and going and going. And I earned that credibility into myself. And then members started to recognize it. My clients started to recognize it. And quickly there's a switch.
Yeah, so I mean, I sort of look at it from the outside as, it's almost like building equity. You have to put the time in, you have to build relationships, you have to have multiple positive value building touch points with people in order to sort of get over the threshold where they're like, oh yeah, shit, Lindy, yeah, you're a good trainer, right?
Yeah.
So, and I mean, like if we weren't on a video call, if we were like standing side by side or sitting, like your head comes up to maybe just north of my belly button. Like you're still a very small person. So in the gym space, you'd never know it because of your energy and your confidence now. But yeah, I for sure would recognize that as sort of having been a very real challenge. But just to kind of, come from the other side of it, tell us a little bit about like the spectrum of clients that you're working with today. Like, who are the people that now see your value and want to work with you? What kinds of clients do you get to do your work with?
Well, I have like the best clients ever. And that's the coolest part about my job is I work with like the 14-year-old who plays hockey and is like extreme athlete. And then I work with the 89-year-old grandma who comes in with a walker. And then I'm training a lawyer, and then I'm training a client who travels from Shanghai. So it's like my realm of clientele is so spread out. Which makes it fun and exciting. So I've met some amazing, amazing people, and I've met some very successful people. But then again, there's the clients who are even more special because they're the students who have been saving for 4 months to do one training package. So like I don't value any client differently, but yeah, it's just amazing.
Awesome. So would you say you're getting to work on lots of different types of goals and lots of different types of programs, or are you someone who gets sought out based on more of a specific style of training or a specific type of result?
Um, I'd say people come. No, it's totally dependent on the client. Like I have some clients who are like, I need you to get me to this goal. And at that point, I'm very goal orientated by nature. So I'm like, okay, accountability, strict program. Who do you need me to be? I'll be that person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, then I have clients who are just complete. They need the emotional side of things. So it's like more of the relationship, more of who can I show up for them? Like, who am I during that hour? What am I filling in their life that they need me to be for that hour? It may not always be a trainer, and that's okay. Um, so yeah, I kind of have to assess that in the initial consultation, and like while I'm getting to know the person, it's like, okay, what role am I playing in their program or in their life?
Awesome. So that kind of like leads me to, a question further down the list that I wanted to ask you, but kind of a nice segue there. When you talk about getting to know someone, when you talk about figuring out who you have to be in order to facilitate their success, do you have any like coaching strategies? Do you have any questions that are really specific that you ask? Like, is there any part of your process that you think is really important for being able to figure that out that is like a little bit generalized, right? Like obviously each individual person is going to have their own specific thing, but in terms of like, hey, these are some sort of big ticket things that I try to do as I'm getting to know somebody, would you be able to share some of those?
Totally. And there's so many. I could talk for hours on that because that's probably what I attribute the success to my business and my clientele is
Okay.
that I truly, truly put so much effort and time into getting to know my client, like understanding that this isn't just like a name and a body walking into the gym, but they're like a literal human being. Like when I ask my client, how are they? It's not just like a good, okay, let's work out. It's like, no, no, no. Like, I want to know, like, what side you slept on last night and, like, what time you woke up and, like, did you step on a Lego piece when you stood up out of your bed? And then, like, did you have coffee? Okay, like, was your coffee already made for you? Did you have milk in it? Like, I thoroughly understand what's going on in that client's life so I can kind of help and assess what are they struggling with, like what can I create like an ease of transaction for them and simplify their life to take at the end of the day take stress off and help them prosper and get to where they want to be.
Okay.
So a lot of questions. I will like literally ask so many questions about my clients' day, how they're feeling, their purpose, their why. Um, and then that relationship builds, right? The more ammo I get. And then they just start opening up to you.
Cool. So, I mean, I kind of get the sense that this is a little bit your personality. Like you're an inquisitive, curious, energized, energetic person. But were you always really good at asking questions, or is that something that you had to practice, or is that something that you had to sort of learn a little bit more about? Was that natural for you, or was there something you had to do to sort of make that a part of how you do what you do?
That's a really good question. And when I started BCPTI, I was reflecting on this.
Oh, we're back. Awesome. All right. So you were just about to explain how you got better at asking questions, or like
Right.
what resources you use to build on that skill.
So I started BCPTI, and I was a long commute to Richmond, and I started Tim Ferriss. I'm sure you know the author Tim Ferriss. I started his podcasts from like episode 1, and I religiously went through every single interview conversation till episode 1 all the way to episode 350 straight consecutively. I wouldn't skip one. And on all my drives and while I was running, while I was training, I was constantly listening to these conversations he had. And he had like such a riveting way of making an hour podcast so interesting. And he would ask these provoking questions. And it was like he would ask a question, and then as the person started to answer, he'd ask a question like, oh, but what was the weather like in that day? Like something completely out there, but you could tell like he was thoroughly grasping what he was like who he was talking to and what he was trying to get at. Like he was trying to visualize the scenario, figure out what was happening in the background of the story. Like he was so good at asking questions. And I think just like when you listen to what that's 350 hours, his podcasts are an hour or 2 hours. I started noticing it, and then you notice it everywhere else. And then I started practicing it. I think then it kind of came out naturally.
That's awesome. I'm gonna put like a caption at the bottom of the screen, which is like, takeaway number one: listen to great interviewers. So like, sounds like
100%.
Tim Ferriss was one for you. It's gonna sound kind of crazy, but like I've been a fan of the Oprah show and the podcast for a long time. Barbara Walters. Like if you go think about like in history who are great interviewers,
Yeah.
that's actually going to be a cool way to maybe just start off by mimicking someone who's good at asking questions until you start to kind of build the repertoire for yourself. That's cool. I like
Totally.
that.
Totally. And
Awesome.
and then podcasts turned into books, turned into other podcasts and ebooks. But I think the root of it is I started noticing the similarities in his interviews and how captivating they were.
Awesome. So on that note, then you've probably got a super long list, but maybe think of like maybe your top 5 recommendations for books or for podcasts that you would recommend to either a trainer or someone who's aspiring to be a trainer or someone who's really passionate about fitness. What do you think? What do you think you'd recommend?
For books, I'd recommend Ben Greenfield's Beyond Training. That one from like a science aspect is really, really good. And he came up with a new one, Boundless. I remember when I was in BCPTI, I also listened to Ignite the Fire or Ignite Your Fire.
Yep.
Have you read that one?
Yeah, I'm familiar with that one for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So that one's a bit more like broad, like personal training, like a bit of business, but it's also, especially when you're becoming a trainer, it's super interesting because you're like, oh my gosh, that's me, that's me. Like there's a whole book on how to be me, like how to be a trainer. Um, I've read like there's lots of leadership books, and then anyone who picks up like you got to read your classics like How to Win Friends and Influence People or 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Like the better you are as a person, the better person you're showing up to be with your people. So any like self-improvement book I always recommend. And it's the person's got to read a book that they're engaged in. So if they're reading a book because they don't like it, then you're not going to get any takeaways. But if you're just reading a book that you thoroughly enjoy, like you're probably going to get more out of that than a book that I give you that you don't want to read.
It's actually a really good point. The idea of just sort of following what sparks your curiosity, right? Like finding things that authentically lift your energy are ultimately going to mean your energy is lifted, whatever that is. So we might start thinking, I know for myself, especially when I first got into, education from like kind of an official job description, I started going like, oh my God, I have to like read like scientific journals, and I have to like follow, like I have to go reread anatomy trains. And like I got thinking that like there was this requirement of like the job description, but like that's not what got me to where I am. That's not really how I do what I do. That's really interesting for people that think that way, but it's not necessarily, what my path to success was. So maybe another takeaway that we could put on this is like, just go immerse yourself in what makes you better.
Yeah.
Go figure out what it is that speaks to you, and then just go get better at that thing versus necessarily following like a formula or a recipe that doesn't really feel like a good fit for you. Is that fair?
Totally. Like if someone can start their day by literally 10 minutes of reading a book that excites them, they're going to show up to their work day, their school, their training with like a better mindset and a mindset to keep kicking ass and learning and growing and receiving information and relaying that information to people that they're surrounded by, or their clients, team members.
Totally. I love it. Cool. Well, listen, I feel like we could carry on forever because you and I are both really happy conversationalists, but let me just ask you one more question. Is there anything else that you want to say or offer before we kind of wrap this initial conversation up?
To all the trainers?
Sure. Yeah, whatever you want.
I think my biggest thing for all all the trainers, especially with Steve Nash or BCPTI, if someone's going to become a trainer, is like thoroughly love your clients. Like love your clients like they're a family member. I always say underestimate them, and I don't mean underestimate them and their capabilities, but treat your client like they're like your 5-year-old daughter. Like make sure they have enough water, and please make sure they have their food for their day, and thoroughly break down a workout program to them so they thoroughly understand. Like take care of them, take care of what they need. We all need someone to just take a little stress off our shoulders, and if you're that person for them, they're gonna stick with you for the rest of their life.
Amazing. I love it. That's awesome. That's also where we find the most meaning in the work that we do, right? If we're working with people that we really genuinely care about, then every hour of our day has a really rewarding aspect to it. So I think that's a great message to end off with. So thank you very much to you. I think there's multiple things we could dive into if we decide to keep this series going. I'm going to put your Instagram in the sort of show notes, the video notes or whatever, along with your podcast and your book recommendations. And thanks so much for spending half an hour in this work from home period with me. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Bye, Lindy.
Bye.